Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is full of unexpected twists, but one revelation shook fans to the core: the truth about Severus Snape's feelings for Lily Potter. This story transformed the grim and unlikable potions master into one of the most tragically heroic figures in the entire saga. Today, I'll walk you through 6 subtle but powerful details that reveal the true depth of the relationship between Severus and Lily. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Severus begged Voldemort to spare Lily, but only her. One of the most shocking moments in the entire story is Snape's plea to Voldemort to spare Lily Potter's life. Only Lily, not James, not Harry. Severus didn't care about Lily's family. He wanted to save the woman he had loved since childhood. It was selfish, it was cruel, but it was honest. And ironically, that very request led to the Dark Lord's downfall. Voldemort really did try to spare Lily, offering her a chance to step aside. That choice allowed her to make a sacrifice, and her death triggered the ancient magic of love, forever changing the course of history. Number 2. Lily and Snape were friends until 5th year. Severus and Lily had been friends since childhood, ever since a young Snape saw her in the park and realized she was magical like him. They were inseparable as they grew up. But everything changed in their 5th year at Hogwarts. Severus became fascinated with the dark arts and drew closer to the future Death Eaters. In a moment of rage, he called Lily a mudblood. That destroyed everything. Despite their years of friendship, Lily didn't forgive him. Not out of spite, but because she understood he had chosen a path that clashed with her values. Number 3. Lily is part of Snape's worst memory. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry accidentally peers into Snape's memories and sees James Potter humiliating Severus in front of the whole school. That memory is considered Snape's worst. But why? The answer lies with Lily. She was there. She defended James. She tried to intervene, but only made things worse. That was when Snape, in a fury, insulted her and lost her for good. For Snape, Lily was the only light in his darkness, and losing her became the most painful moment of his life. Number 4. Snape and Lily were both potions prodigies. What connected such a kind, open-hearted girl with a sullen teenager obsessed with dark magic? The answer is simple: brilliance. Both were incredibly talented in potions. Horace Slughorn remembered Lily as one of his best students, while Snape went on to create new formulas, improve existing recipes, and earn the nickname Half-Blood Prince. You can imagine them spending hours discussing ingredients, debating measurements, experimenting side by side. They shared a passion no one else understood. Number 5. Snape never insulted Harry because of Lily. From the very beginning, Severus treated Harry with cruelty and sarcasm. He mocked him, humiliated him, made his hatred obvious. But never once did he speak ill of Lily, not once. He despised Harry as a copy of James, the arrogant, self-assured popular hero Snape had loathed since school. But Lily's memory remained untouched, sacred. It's a subtle but crucial detail that explains why Snape kept protecting Harry despite his deep resentment, not for Harry's sake, but for hers. Number 6. The scene where Snape cradles Lily exists only in the film. Fans of the films will never forget the moment in Deathly Hallows when Snape enters the Potter's home, sees Lily's body, and weeping, takes her into his arms. It became the symbol of his tragedy. But this scene doesn't exist in the books. Snape never appears in Godric's Hollow after the murders. It's a cinematic invention. It's beautiful, but raises questions. Why was Snape at the Potter's home? Why didn't he help Harry? The film added emotion, but broke logic. In the books, though, Snape loved Lily desperately. He was never there when she died. That makes his pain no less real. He didn't make it in time, didn't save her, didn't even see her. Number 7. Snape's patronus remained forever tied to Lily. When Severus Snape cast his patronus, it wasn't a serpent or a raven or something dark and cold. It was a silver doe, the same form Lily Evans had. He had loved her so deeply, so completely, that even his magic, his very soul, took her shape. Years had passed, she was gone, he had betrayed her once, then spent the rest of his life paying for it. And yet, when Albus Dumbledore saw that shining creature, he froze. "After all this time?" he asked, stunned. Snape turned his face, quiet, steady. "Always." That one word said everything. It wasn't a line, it was a confession. It was an entire life reduced to a single truth. Snape never moved on, never replaced her, never even tried. His patronus remained unchanged, unwavering. In a world of shifting loyalties and broken oaths, it was the one part of him that stayed pure. Lily's light had touched him once, and it never left. The silver doe walked silently through the darkness, the same way Snape did, alone, but loyal, always. Number 8. Snape never blamed Lily for her choice. He never cursed her name, not once. Even after Lily married James Potter, the boy who humiliated him in front of half the school, Snape never let bitterness touch the way he spoke of her. His fury was always for James. His silence for her. In the pensive, Harry saw it clearly, the sharpness in Snape's voice whenever Potter was mentioned, the way he twisted his mouth at the mention of the marauders. But when it came to Lily, there was only stillness, a kind of reverence. Snape never said she made the wrong choice. He just lived in the shadow of it. That silence spoke louder than rage. Snape accepted what he could never have. He didn't try to interfere. He didn't beg her to leave James. He didn't blame her for loving someone else. His love never became resentment. That was the difference. "You have your mother's eyes," he said with pain, but never with regret toward her. Lily remained untouched by his hatred, even as he drowned in it. For Severus Snape, loving her meant never staining her memory, even when she had chosen someone else. Number 9. Severus kept Lily's letter for many years. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry steps into the ruins of Snape's hidden rooms at Spinner's End, he finds something strange among the carefully hidden things. Part of a letter, torn, faded, and stained by time. It was a page written by Lily Potter, addressed to Sirius Black, but kept, hoarded, cherished by Severus Snape. Only one piece survived. Just a few words. "Thank you for Harry's broom. He flies so well it." That line, so simple, meant everything to him. Her handwriting, her warmth, her voice, captured in ink. He hadn't kept her photograph. He had kept her words. There was more. Folded in the page, Harry found a piece of the photo that once went with the letter. Lily, laughing, holding baby Harry. And a corner was missing. Snape had taken it. The part where Lily's face glowed with joy. That scrap of paper, worn at the edges, wasn't just a memory. It was a shrine. Proof that Severus had held on, not to anger, not to regret, but to love. For him, her words were sacred. That torn letter wasn't a souvenir. It was the last thing he had left of the girl he loved and the life that could never be. Number 10. Snape tried to protect Lily from dark magic. He hid it from her at first. The fascination with curses, the forbidden pages in the restricted section, the whispered conversations with future Death Eaters. Severus knew that Lily Evans hated cruelty. She believed in fairness, in decency, in light. So he lied. Or worse, he stayed silent. Every time she asked about the people he was spending time with, he deflected. He told himself it was for power, for protection. But deep down, he knew Lily would never follow him down that path. When she pleaded with him to stop, to see what he was becoming, he couldn't meet her eyes. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize," she said, in the order of the Phoenix, repeating the words that had once ended their friendship. By the time Lily saw how far he had gone, it was already too late. Snape had chosen his circle, Mulciber, Avery, Rosier. Names whispered in fear, names Lily despised. She told him clearly, "You call everyone on my birth mudblood behind my back." He denied it, but then he said it to her face. That moment shattered everything. It wasn't just a word, it was the final proof that he had let the darkness take root. He tried to apologize, begged her to forgive him, but she walked away. And for the rest of his life, Severus Snape carried that silence like a curse he had cast on himself. Number 11. Snape gave up revenge for Lily's memory. He had every reason to become a monster. James Potter had humiliated him for years. The marauders mocked him in front of Lily, dangled him upside down, stripped away his dignity. Snape had mastered curses most students feared to pronounce, but he never used them in full. Not even on James. Even when he joined the Death Eaters, even when the darkness pulled at him, Severus never crossed that line. Not because he forgave James, but because Lily wouldn't have wanted revenge. Her name alone held his fury back. After her death, the path of vengeance was wide open. Snape could have let Harry die. He could have fed Voldemort false information. He could have disappeared into the shadows, letting the world burn. But he didn't. Instead, he went to Dumbledore. He turned against his former master. He risked his life every day, spying, lying, and pretending to serve the very man who had killed the only person he ever loved. "You are protecting Lily's son," Dumbledore said once. Snape didn't hesitate. "He has her eyes." That was enough. Her memory was more powerful than rage. He wore bitterness like armor, but inside was a man who refused to let grief become cruelty. His sarcastic jabs at Harry were sharp, but he never harmed him. He hated James, but he saved James's son again and again. Every time he brewed wolfsbane for Remus Lupin, every time he stood between Harry and danger, every time he lied to Voldemort. It was Lily's voice, long gone, that still guided him. Severus Snape chose love over vengeance, and that choice, silent, painful, and hidden, made him braver than anyone ever knew. Number 12. Snape's final wish was to see Lily's eyes. Blood pooled beneath him. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. The venom of Nagini was already burning through his veins. In those final moments, when everything else fell away, lies, bitterness, even fear, Severus Snape made one request. "Look at me!" His voice trembled, no longer harsh or cold, but fragile. Not because he wanted comfort, not because he feared death, but because he needed to see her eyes one last time. Harry Potter, confused and horrified, leaned closer, and there they were, Lily's eyes, green, clear, and full of life. The same eyes Severus had watched since they were children, the same eyes that had once looked at him with trust, then pain, and finally, nothing at all. But now they looked at him again, through her son. That simple gaze broke through years of anger, shame, and guilt. It brought Severus peace. The boy never knew, not then, that in that moment he was Lily's last gift to Snape. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. There was no speech, only silence, broken by shallow breaths and falling tears. The war raged just outside the walls, but inside the shrieking shack, time froze. A man who had lived a life of secrecy died not as a spy, not as a professor, not as a villain, but as someone in love. Dumbledore had asked years before, after all this time? And now Snape's final look gave the answer. Always. Later, when Harry entered the Pensive, he saw the truth. He watched a life shaped by love and shattered by loss. And suddenly that moment, "Look at me," was no longer strange or desperate. It was everything. It was a farewell to Lily, a wordless confession, a dying man's attempt to hold on just once more to the only good thing that had ever lived in his heart. Number 13. Lily saved Snape from complete darkness. Severus Snape stood on the edge of darkness, deeper than most dared to imagine. He had already chosen the path of the Death Eaters. He wore their mark. He studied the dark arts. He believed power could erase the shame of his past. But one thing held him back from falling completely. Lily Evans, even after she walked away, after he called her mudblood and shattered the last fragile thread between them, she remained the only person who had seen goodness in him. And in some quiet part of his soul, that memory refused to die. The moment he overheard the prophecy in the Hog's Head Inn changed everything. He ran to Voldemort, repeated the words he barely understood. Only later did he realize the prophecy pointed to Lily's son. And Voldemort had already decided to kill them all. That's when the mask cracked. "Hide them all! Hide them!"
"I beg you," Snape pleaded to Dumbledore. "What will you give me in return, Severus?" asked the headmaster. "Anything." That one word, spoken with desperation, broke the walls he had built around himself. It wasn't about power anymore, it was about her. Snape didn't return to the light because he believed in Dumbledore's ideals. He didn't care about the Order of the Phoenix. He became a double agent not for honor, but for Lily, and he never lied about that. When Dumbledore questioned his loyalty, Snape didn't pretend. "You disgust me," said Dumbledore, upon realizing Snape had asked Voldemort only to spare Lily, not James or Harry. But Snape's love was never noble or pure. It was painful, selfish, human, and utterly real. Lily was gone, but her memory shaped every step Snape took afterward. He protected Harry because of her. He risked his life every day, living between two worlds, despised by both. He brewed potions, whispered lies, took beatings from Voldemort's snake, and never once asked for thanks. He did it all because of a girl who once smiled at him by the riverbank. The boy she left behind became Snape's last promise. He may have started in darkness, but it was Lily who pulled him back. Not with magic, but with love. Number 14. Snape called her by name when no one else could. Of all the people who spoke of Lily Evans after her death, few used her name without attaching it to someone else's tragedy. In the world shaped by war and loss, she was spoken of as Harry Potter's mother or the woman Voldemort killed. Even within the walls of Hogwarts, her memory was filtered through the prism of other people's grief, but in the depths of the dungeons, in a voice that never softened for anyone else, her name was spoken plainly. Lily? No embellishment, no explanation. Severus Snape never needed one. Her name alone was everything. The way he said it was not accidental, it was deliberate in its simplicity, intimate in its restraint. For Severus Snape, Lily was not a symbol or a martyr. She was not a tragic figure or a footnote in the story of the boy who lived. She was not his redemption arc. She was the girl who laughed at his jokes when no one else did, the girl who defended him on the playground and told him he was clever, the girl who stood between him and loneliness long before she stood between her son and death. In a world that tried to strip her of individuality, Severus clung to her identity like a lifeline. Calling her by name was his rebellion against time, death, and everything that followed. There's a moment, quiet and almost unnoticed, buried deep in the prince's tale, when this truth cuts through the fog of decades. Dumbledore asks Snape, "You disgust me," in response to Snape's desperate plea to protect Harry. But then comes the line, as if exhaled from a place untouched by hatred. "After all this time?" And Snape answers, "Always." The word became iconic, but the emotion behind it was already known, inscribed in the way he remembered her not as a symbol but as Lily. No one else in the Order, not even James's closest friends, spoke her name with such clarity. They had let her become history. Severus had not. Snape's memory of Lily was not frozen in time, but alive in motion. He remembered her as she was in the grass of the playground, in the shadow of the trees at Hogwarts, in the letters she wrote to Sirius, and in the way she smiled when he explained something arcane about potions. Others remembered her in photographs or newspaper clippings. Snape remembered the pitch of her voice, the curve of her scowl, the look in her eyes when she was disappointed in him. He bore the pain of that disappointment like a burn that never scarred over. But he never stopped saying her name. When Harry first steps into Snape's memory in the Pensive, he sees the childhood they shared in Spinner's End. The way Severus watches her from behind bushes, not as a stalker, but as a boy too awkward to approach the light. Lily's laughter breaks the monotony of his world. Her kindness is not a grand act, but small, gentle. She asks questions, she listens, she believes in magic long before she understands it. And Severus, in return, does something he rarely does for anyone else. He opens up. She is the first person to whom he offers not only information, but trust.
The tragedy of their friendship is not only in how it ended, but in how inevitable that end was. The growing chasm between them was fueled by ambition, pain, and choices that neither fully understood. Yet even when he called her a mudblood in a moment of anger and betrayal, even when he failed to apologize in time, even when she turned away from him forever, he never stopped loving her in the way only he could. With obsession, yes. With self-destruction, yes, but also with devotion so deep it hollowed him out. Snape's continued use of Lily's name is not just an act of mourning, it's preservation. It's the act of keeping her real. He didn't place her on a pedestal or wrap her in sainthood. He remembered her humanity, her flaws, her laughter, her temper. He remembered the exact way she rolled her eyes when James Potter did something idiotic, the way her hands fidgeted when she lied, the way her voice changed when she was nervous. This specificity is what made her real to him long after she was gone. When Snape agrees to protect Harry, it is not because of Harry, it is because of Lily. It is not a choice born from admiration of Dumbledore's cause or from belief in prophecy. It is a reaction, almost primal, to the loss of the only person who ever saw him as more than his worst instincts. He has her eyes, Snape says again and again, not because he cares about the boy, but because it's the only tangible link to her that remains. Her eyes, alive in another face, haunt him. It's not poetic, it's torment. Harry never understands this until the end. Not really. Not when Snape sneers at him in class, not when he assigns detention or insults his father, but when he pours Snape's final memory into the pensieve and steps into the private sorrow of another man's life, he sees it. The boy under the tree, the girl with the laughter like spring, the name spoken with reverence. It is then that Harry learns the truth. Not just that Snape loved his mother, but that he never stopped calling her Lily, because to stop would be to let her be forgotten. In contrast, everyone else had folded her into history. To the wizarding world, Lily Evans had become a monolith of loss. She was spoken of with respect, but from a distance. Harry's mother, they'd say, or one of Voldemort's victims. Even Remus Lupin, who had known her well, referred to her more often as part of a group than as an individual. Snape alone resisted that reduction. In calling her Lily, he made her personal again. Number 15. Severus hated himself for losing her. Of all the heartbreaks woven into the vast fabric of the Harry Potter story, perhaps none is as quietly devastating as the tragedy of Severus Snape. While others fell as victims of war, treachery, or fate, Snape's fall was different. It was internal, self-inflicted, and long. He did not die at the moment of his death. He began dying the day he lost Lily Evans, and he lived the rest of his life carrying that loss like a wound that never closed. Unlike many broken souls in the wizarding world, Snape did not blame the world, Dumbledore, James Potter, or even Voldemort. His punishment was knowing exactly who was responsible, himself. Snape's love for Lily was not a fleeting crush. It was rooted in their shared childhood, in the ordinary streets of Spinner's End, where magic first bloomed between them like a secret language. For a boy like Severus, born into neglect and harshness, Lily was light. Not just in the sense of admiration, but salvation. She saw him when no one else did. Her kindness wasn't just affection, it was a rare recognition that he mattered. And yet as years passed and choices mounted, he managed to destroy the one bond that might have saved him. The moment that shattered everything came not with a wand or a curse, but with a single word, mudblood. It was spoken in anger, in shame, and in fear. Lily had defended him from humiliation at the hands of James Potter, only to be slapped in the face by the very person she tried to protect. "I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her." That was the sentence. It appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Harry watches Snape's worst memory in the pensieve. That one word unraveled everything. Snape had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. It is not that Snape didn't try to apologize. He did. But even his apology, broken and desperate, could not mend what had been broken by hatred and ideology. Lily saw the choices he had begun to make. She saw the way he was drawn to dark magic, to friends who laughed at cruelty and embraced prejudice. She understood that he was changing, and not in a way she could follow. By the time she told him, "You've chosen your way and I've chosen mine," it was too late. The door had closed. The brilliance of Snape's tragedy is not just that he lost her. It's that he knew absolutely, unflinchingly, that it was his fault. Unlike so many others who point fingers or construct false narratives to shield themselves from guilt, Snape carried his failure with complete honesty. He never tried to rewrite the story. He never said Lily overreacted or misunderstood him. He bore her absence as his own deserved punishment. This knowledge did not transform him into a saint. It twisted him. It made him bitter, sarcastic, and cold. But beneath the barbs and cruelty there was something else. A relentless need to atone. He never asked to be forgiven. He never even expected redemption. What he sought was to serve something greater than himself, something that would honor Lily's memory. Protecting her son, even though Harry was a constant reminder of James, became his purpose. Snape didn't protect Harry out of affection. He often disliked the boy, saw James in his every smirk and every act of defiance. But Harry was Lily's son. That fact alone anchored Snape to a promise he could not break. "You have your mother's eyes." He said it to Harry more than once, and each time it was less an observation and more a confession. Lily's eyes haunted him because they were the one part of her that survived. It was those eyes that reminded Snape of the woman he lost and the man he had once been. When Dumbledore asked Snape to watch over Harry, Snape agreed, not out of loyalty to the cause, but out of devotion to Lily. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the truth is revealed when Snape says, "Always," in response to Dumbledore's shocked realization that Snape's protection of Harry stemmed from his love for Lily. That single word, simple, unwavering, summarizes the entire arc of his life. She had died, and yet his love had not. He stayed at Hogwarts for many reasons, but one reason stood above the rest. She had once walked those corridors. The castle, for him, was a reliquary of memories. Every hallway echoed with her laughter. Every classroom reminded him of the days when she sat beside him, curious and kind. By remaining in that world, he could hold on to the shadow of her presence. Hogwarts was his purgatory, his sanctuary, and his prison. Even in his work as potions master, there was something meditative, almost sacred in what he did. Brewing potions is a quiet, disciplined art. It requires control, knowledge, and silence. It is not hard to imagine that Snape found a kind of peace in it. In every perfectly executed potion, there was perhaps a trace of the boy who once wanted to impress Lily with his magical skill. Every vial he corked was a piece of order in a life ruined by chaos. He never remarried. He never sought out companionship. His life was monastic, shaped around secrecy and solitude. Even the way he walked, robes billowing, steps sharp and purposeful, spoke of a man who kept the world at arm's length. This was not arrogance. It was defense. Vulnerability had cost him Lily. He would not expose himself again. Number 16. His secret love became a shield for Harry. It began with a boy who loved a girl. Severus Snape, awkward and solitary, found in Lily Evans the only light that warmed the edges of his otherwise cold and silent world. She was not like the others, not cruel like the students who mocked him, nor arrogant like the ones who ignored him. Lily looked at him, really looked, and where others saw a greasy-haired Slytherin from a poor Muggle neighborhood, she saw something else. She saw someone worth her time. That first kindness, so freely given, grew roots that never died. Even as their lives diverged, even as choices pulled them apart, Snape's love for her remained as fixed as the North Star. And this love, silent and burdened with guilt, became a shield. Not for her son. Harry Potter entered Hogwarts with no idea of the tangled loyalties that coiled in the shadows around him. He saw in Professor Snape a figure of contempt, harsh, sarcastic, and openly biased against him. He felt targeted, dismissed, scorned. What Harry didn't see, what he couldn't have seen, was the war raging beneath Snape's black robes. A war between a heart that had once called her name and a face that so vividly wore the man she chose instead. James Potter had bullied Snape in their youth. Harry inherited James's eyes and hair, his arrogance, his talent on a broomstick. Every time Snape looked at the boy, he saw the man who had humiliated him. And yet, beneath that bitter surface, another truth lived. Harry also had Lily's eyes, green like the lake where she once stood beside Snape as a friend, green like spring in Spinner's End. Every time those eyes looked back at him, Snape remembered the promise he made to Dumbledore. Hide them. Hide them all then. Keep her, them, safe. After Lily's death, Snape's life became a penance. He turned double agent, choosing to live in constant peril for the sake of the child she left behind. Not out of love for the child himself, but for the woman who had given him meaning. Dumbledore asked, "After all this time?" Snape replied, "Always." It wasn't just a confession, but it was a map of his soul. That one word held decades of pain, longing, regret, and devotion. Snape never sought recognition. His sacrifices were veiled, his kindnesses wrapped in barbs. He mocked Harry's fame, deducted points from Gryffindor, belittled him in class. Yet when danger loomed, he was always there. In Philosopher's Stone, it was Snape's counter-curse that stopped Professor Quirrell from knocking Harry off his broom during the Quidditch match. At the time, Harry thought Snape was the one trying to harm him. In truth, Snape's incantation was the reason Harry stayed in the air. Dumbledore later confirmed this, and Snape's actions were once again hidden in plain sight. In Prisoner of Azkaban, it was Snape who burst into the shrieking shack, wand at the ready, believing Harry and Hermione were being held by a mass murderer. His hatred of Sirius Black and Remus Lupin blinded him, yes, but his first instinct was to protect the students. And when Lupin transformed into a werewolf, it was Snape who threw himself in front of the children, shielding them with his own body. Even when unconscious, his instincts remained those of a protector. The most complex and haunting layer of this protection came in Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore ordered Snape to teach Harry occlumency. The purpose was to shield Harry's mind from Voldemort's influence. But the sessions were a disaster. Snape's bitterness clashed with Harry's defiance. Harry saw only humiliation and cruelty. What he couldn't see was Snape's desperation, the fear that if Voldemort continued to access Harry's mind, the Dark Lord would learn the truth Snape had spent years concealing, that he no longer served him. The stakes were not simply psychological, they were fatal. Snape's complexity lay in his paradoxes. He hated Harry, and yet he saved him. He mocked his incompetence, yet ensured he had every chance to survive. His love for Lily was unreciprocated, tarnished by mistakes, but it never withered. It fed a moral compass warped by Slytherin logic and Death Eater loyalties. He was not a hero in the traditional sense. He was a man who had lost everything and chose to fight anyway. When Dumbledore faced death from the cursed ring in Half-Blood Prince, it was Snape who contained the curse, prolonging the headmaster's life. When Dumbledore asked Snape to be the one to kill him, to spare Draco Malfoy's soul and preserve the secrecy of their plan, Snape obeyed, despite the revulsion it caused him. This moment revealed the depth of Snape's commitment to a mission that gave his life meaning. Protect Harry, protect the secret, protect the cause. In the final book, Deathly Hallows, the truth emerged like a ghost from the past. Snape, mortally wounded by Voldemort's snake, used his dying breath not for vengeance or glory, but to offer Harry a final gift. Take it, he said, pressing a stream of silvery memory into Harry's hands. Within that memory was the truth, that Snape had watched over him always, that his loyalty was never to Voldemort, and that his love for Lily had defined every step he took. In the memory, we see the beginning, the young Severus watching Lily with awe as she makes petals float through the air. His heart fragile and hopeful. Later we see the chasm grow as their paths diverge. We witness Snape's agony when he learns of Lily's death, the raw anguish on his face as he cradles her body in Godric's Hollow. It is not the pain of a former friend or a guilty servant, it is the shattering of a soul. And then we hear him whisper, "Always." These scenes don't excuse Snape's cruelty. He was flawed, deeply so. He bullied Neville Longbottom, humiliated Hermione Granger, and held on to grudges like armor. But the memories force us to reconsider him not as a villain or saint, but as something far more human, a man broken by love and defined by sacrifice. Number 17. Lily was the only bright light in Snape's childhood. There is a shadow draped over Spinner's End, where the cobbled streets echo with the weight of rain and resentment. Behind the grimy windows of a narrow house on that street, a boy named Severus Snape grew up not with laughter, but with the heavy silence of disappointment and fear. His father, Tobias Snape, a muggle who loathed magic and everything associated with it, did not hide his contempt for his wife, Eileen Prince, a witch who had once belonged to a proud magical lineage, but now lived in muted submission. Their arguments carved scars into the walls, and into Severus himself, long before he learned to use a wand. In that bitter air there was no softness, no joy, only the knowledge that he was different, and that this difference only deepened his isolation. Even in his early years, Severus felt the pull of magic within him, a pulse he could neither explain nor share. He watched his parents with wary eyes, growing up in the liminal space between two worlds, yet accepted by neither. But then, in the overgrown park near his home, he saw something that would etch itself into his memory forever, a girl with red hair like fire in the sun, laughing as she floated above the ground, leaves swirling beneath her. Lily Evans. In that moment, Severus saw more than just a magical occurrence. He saw light in the greyness of his world. Lily, unlike the children in Severus's neighborhood, did not look at him with suspicion. She didn't laugh when his clothes didn't fit or when his hair hung in greasy strands. She saw something else, or rather, she didn't look through the lens of class or cruelty. When he revealed to her that she was a witch and explained the magical world, her eyes widened, not in fear but in wonder. For the first time, Severus wasn't mocked for his knowledge. He was appreciated. And in that fragile bond, something in him began to heal. Their friendship, though rooted in childhood, became the only sanctuary Severus ever knew. The summer days spent together were more than escapes. They were lifelines. Lily asked questions about Hogwarts, about magic, about spells he had read in his mother's old books. Severus, for all his awkwardness, spoke with passion. She listened, smiling, encouraging. In those hours beneath the trees, Severus experienced an emotion he had never dared to name, belonging. But it was more than friendship. For Severus, Lily became a symbol of hope itself. She was kind where others were cruel. She defended him when boys from the neighborhood taunted him. She understood what it meant to be different, even if her home life was filled with laughter and warmth, unlike his own. He clung to her in the way a drowning man clings to driftwood, not just out of need, but out of awe. At Hogwarts their bond continued, for a while. Sorted into Slytherin, Severus was both proud and isolated. Lily, a Gryffindor, found herself drawn into a new circle of friends, among them James Potter, whose arrogance grated on Severus like sandpaper. Yet Lily remained close to him, defending him from the jeers of other Gryffindors and often from the very boys who would eventually win her heart. To Severus, her loyalty was not just admirable, it was sacred. There's a moment in the books that stands out with quiet agony. After a particularly cruel incident in their 5th year, James Potter hoists Severus upside down, exposing his undergarments before a crowd of students. Lily intervenes, demanding James stop. Severus, humiliated and raw, snaps at her and calls her a mudblood. It's a slur, one rooted in the very prejudice that Lily despised. And with that word, he destroyed the one pure thing he had ever known. Yet even that fracture did not erase the light Lily had left in him. In the Order of the Phoenix, as Harry watches Snape's memories in the Pensive, we see those precious fragments. We see young Severus watching Lily laugh. We see the way he looks at her, not with desire alone, but with reverence. "You're a witch," he whispers to her as a child, his voice trembling, not with arrogance, but with the astonishment of a boy who has found a miracle. What makes this detail so powerful is not merely that Severus loved Lily. It is that she was, quite literally, the only beautiful thing in the barren landscape of his early life. Everything else was grey, but she was in colour. The abusive household, the harsh whispers from other children, the loneliness, all of it was endured because of the quiet promise that, at least in one person's eyes, Severus was more than what the world told him he was. Even after their friendship dissolved, even after Lily married James, even after Severus joined the Death Eaters, she remained that light. When he realized that Voldemort intended to kill her, his reaction was not strategic or political. It was desperate. He begged Dumbledore to protect her, to do anything to save her life. "Hide them all, then," he said. "Keep them safe. Please." The way his voice falters in that memory reveals a truth he never admitted to anyone, that his love for Lily was never about possession, but preservation. The moment of her death changed him forever. When he found out she was gone, Severus collapsed, clinging to her body, sobbing in a way that breaks the reader's heart. It wasn't just grief. It was the collapse of the last good thing he had ever known. From that moment forward, he lived not for himself, but for her memory. His choice to protect Harry, Lily's son, was not born of affection for the boy, but out of guilt and an undying promise. Snape became a spy, a double agent, and ultimately a hero. But he never found peace. The loss of Lily wasn't simply a romantic wound. It was the death of the only anchor that kept him tied to humanity. When Dumbledore asks him, years later, after all this time, Snape responds with a single word, always. It is perhaps the most iconic line in the entire series, not because it is dramatic, but because it encapsulates a lifetime of suffering, devotion, and regret. What makes Lily's role in Snape's life so tragic is its permanence. He never moved on, he never loved again, he never sought to replace her in any corner of his heart. She remained his moral compass, even as he waded into darkness. She was the reason he turned back, the reason he endured years of hatred, the reason he let himself be misunderstood, all for the sake of a boy who reminded him of her eyes. There's an unforgettable moment in the Deathly Hallows when Harry tells Voldemort, "Snape was Dumbledore's." But that wasn't entirely true. Snape belonged to Lily. Every decision he made after her death was tethered to the hope that her sacrifice meant something, that he could honor it by protecting what she loved. Even his patronus, a doe, matched hers. Magic is never random in the Harry Potter universe, and the choice of a patronus, born of one's deepest emotion, reveals everything. His patronus never changed because his heart never did. Snape was a complicated man, cruel, bitter, often unfair. But behind that sneer was a shattered soul, still cradling a childhood dream that had died in Godric's Hollow. Lily wasn't just a girl he loved, she was the embodiment of everything he had ever wanted: acceptance, warmth, kindness. When she was in his life, he believed he could be good. Without her, he didn't believe he was worth saving, only that others were. The scenes between young Severus and Lily, though sparse in the books, are heavy with meaning. J.K. Rowling chose to show them not as lovers, but as children on opposite shores of the same ocean. Lily offered her hand across that divide. Severus took it and never truly let go. When their paths diverged, he did not stop loving her. But he also couldn't follow her. That perhaps is the cruelest tragedy of all. One might ask why Lily is so important, why she holds such weight in Snape's life. The answer is simple. She was the only person who gave him a reason to believe in light. In her company, he was not the greasy Slytherin, not the half-blood outcast, not the boy from the broken home. He was just Severus, and she liked him. That was enough. It is no coincidence that Snape's worst memory, as seen in The Pensive, is not of abuse or punishment, but of the moment he lost her. That memory, where she walks away after he insults her, is the point where his heart closes. The boy who once believed in kindness hardens into the man we meet in the first book. Cold, distant, impenetrable. But beneath that surface, the memory of her burns like a hidden candle. The depth of Snape's pain and the purity of his love reframe his entire character. He is no longer just the bitter professor or the misunderstood anti-hero. He is a man who built his entire adult life around a lost friendship. And in doing so, he became both more tragic and more noble than any of us had guessed. Lily was never his to lose, and yet he lost her. That paradox haunted him, but it also guided him. The boy who once sat on the floor in a broken home, who dreamed of magic and found a friend beneath a willow tree, grew into a man who stood between a tyrant and a child, because of love. Number 18, Snape was jealous of James even before their romance. It began before the romance ever took shape, before Lily Evans fell for James Potter, before their names became linked in the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, before the tragedy that would seal all their fates. In the shadowed corners of a castle teeming with life, one boy watched with guarded eyes. Severus Snape, cloaked in solitude and bitterness, harbored a resentment that festered long before it found a name. His envy of James Potter was not born from hindsight, but from the cruel immediacy of adolescence. And it was Lily who stood at the center of the storm. Snape and Lily met before Hogwarts, their connection sparked not by circumstance, but by curiosity, that electric bond of difference and understanding. Lily's magic was budding, and Severus, already versed in spells no first year should know, offered guidance. In that quiet Severus, the outcast of Spinner's End, Lily saw someone unpolished, yes, but kind, intelligent, and in his own way, extraordinary. She didn't yet know what he would become. He didn't yet know how easily she could be taken away. From the beginning, Severus saw James Potter not merely as an annoyance, but as a threat. James was everything he was not, confident, beloved, gifted in magic and Quidditch alike. And James knew it. He swaggered through corridors with the casual arrogance of someone who had never needed to fight for attention. Girls laughed at his jokes. Teachers praised his potential. And Lily, the one person Severus felt truly close to, smiled a little more brightly when James was around. It wasn't love, not yet. Lily rolled her eyes when James teased her. She frowned when he tormented Severus. She was not blind to his flaws, but even her disapproval gave James a place in her thoughts. Severus saw it all. He saw James twirl his wand through his fingers, lean back in chairs like he owned the world, interrupt class with lazy confidence. And he saw Lily's face. The irritation, yes, but also the flicker of amusement she couldn't always hide. That flicker gnawed at Severus like acid. During their 5th year, something in Severus began to harden. The marauders were more insufferable than ever. James, in particular, had taken to hexing students in the corridors for sport, and Severus was a frequent target. Snivellus, James called him. The name stuck like a bruise, but it wasn't the insult that cut deepest. It was the way Lily laughed when James said it, just once, just barely, and perhaps she regretted it instantly. But Severus never forgot. In that instant, he saw the balance shift. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius Black casually describes James's arrogance. He was an idiot, Sirius admits, but he grew out of it. Severus wasn't around to see that growth. He only saw the boy who hexed him upside down in front of the girl he adored. Lily ran to his defense that day, yes, but the moment Severus opened his mouth and uttered the word mudblood, everything collapsed. But the seed of that explosion had been planted long before, and it had a name: jealousy. Severus never said it aloud, not even to himself, but his actions betrayed him. He followed Lily like a shadow. He watched her in charms class, where she raised her hand before anyone else. He memorized the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. He grew quiet when she mentioned James, even in complaint. He scoffed at her tales of Gryffindor idiocy, but clung to every word. He lived in fear of the day her complaints turned into admiration. That day came slowly, then all at once. The potions classroom was one of the few places where Severus felt like more than a shadow. He excelled there, precise, innovative, unflinching, and Lily, too, shone at brewing. For a time, it was theirs. They shared ingredients, discussed theories, lost in the details of fluxweed and knotgrass. But outside that sanctuary, their worlds were drifting. Lily's friends whispered about James, who had stopped cursing people quite so often. She said she still hated him, but she also admitted he'd gotten better. That casual phrase undid Severus. Better? How? Was she comparing? Was she forgiving? The thought consumed him. He delved deeper into the dark arts, seeking refuge in knowledge and control. But even as he mastered dangerous curses, he was losing the only light in his life. Lily was slipping away, not abruptly, not with a declaration, but with a slow, graceful drift toward the boy who had once mocked her friends. Severus couldn't stop it. So he stewed in rage. Jealousy twisted him. It bled into every interaction with James. It wasn't only hatred for the bullying or the arrogance. It was deeper. A wounded, poisonous longing for something he couldn't have. He wanted to be seen as James was seen. He wanted Lily to look at him with admiration, not pity or frustration. He wanted to be the hero, not the cautionary tale. But no matter how clever he was, how talented, how loyal, he couldn't compete with the easy charisma of a Gryffindor golden boy. There is a moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry sees into Snape's memories, and the truth becomes unbearable. The famous Do Patronus, the anguished whisper, always. It is a moment that defines Snape for many fans, a symbol of undying love, of loyalty that transcends death. But it also retroactively shades every earlier moment with heartbreak. When Lily chose James, it wasn't simply a romantic preference. For Severus, it was a final betrayal. Or at least, that's how he saw it. But the tragedy was, in part, his own making. His bitterness had driven him to the wrong friends, the wrong ideas. He called her mudblood, not out of belief, but because he wanted to wound her before she left him. But she already had. Even before that word passed his lips, she was turning toward the boy he hated most. Not because James was perfect, but because Severus had become someone Lily could no longer recognize. It's easy to blame James, easy to paint him as the villain in Severus's story, and in many ways he was. He humiliated Snape, flaunted his power, and took what Severus valued most. But James didn't steal Lily, she chose him. And that choice cut Severus to the core. He had known her first, he had loved her longer. But love, as Dumbledore would later imply, is not possession. And Severus, in his youth, didn't understand that. One scene that captures this tension perfectly is during the 5th year, when Snape is dangling upside down, robes over his head, wand gone. Lily rushes to his side, demands that James stop. James laughs, says he'll stop if Snape thanks him. Lily glares, and then Snape, cornered, ashamed, snaps at her. That's when the word comes out. The damage was done. "I didn't mean," he says later, but Lily replies, "But you call everyone of my birth mudblood, Severus. Why should I be any different?" This moment wasn't a slip. It was a culmination. Years of jealousy, bitterness, fear, and longing had led to it. Severus wasn't just angry at James. He was angry at the world for favoring boys like James. He was angry at Lily for noticing. He was angry at himself for not being enough. And in his fury, he destroyed the only thing he truly valued, her trust. Afterwards, Severus tried to apologize. He begged. He waited by the common room entrances. He sent notes, but Lily didn't waver. The word had broken something fundamental. Perhaps more importantly, she had already been drifting toward James, not out of vengeance or rebellion, but because she was growing. And Severus wasn't. He was sinking, and she could no longer follow. Years later, when Harry arrives at Hogwarts, Severus's resentment remains palpable. He sees James in the boy's face, in his messy hair, in his arrogance. But also he sees Lily, in the eyes, in the courage, in the quiet fury. He cannot reconcile the two. He lashes out. He protects. He loathes. He grieves. And through it all, the ghost of a teenage jealousy still lingers. Severus Snape's story is often told as one of redemption. But before redemption comes loss, and before loss, envy. Before Lily married James, before Voldemort marked Harry as his equal, before Severus switched sides, he was simply a boy in a dark robe, watching the girl he loved laugh at another boy's jokes. That pain was real. That pain shaped everything. In the end, Snape's tragedy was not that he lost Lily to James. It was that he never believed he could win her without losing himself. And so he chose the path of power, of secrecy, of control, and found it empty. The jealousy that began in youth became the chain he wore into adulthood, clinking softly behind every bitter word and every silent act of heroism. Even as he died, in that broken boathouse, blood soaking the floor, his final request was to see Harry's eyes. Not because they were James's, but because they were hers. He had loved her before she ever looked at James. He had feared losing her before he had a reason to. And long before she fell for James Potter, Severus Snape had already begun to fall. Number 19, Severus tried to change himself for Lily. Of all the tragic tales that run through the corridors of Hogwarts, few are as quietly devastating as that of Severus Snape and Lily Evans. Their story is not one of romance, nor one of fulfilled hope. It is a story of loss, regret, and a desperate, silent transformation that came too late. There are few moments more haunting in the Harry Potter series than the slow unraveling of Snape's inner world, driven by a single desperate desire: to be better for the only person who ever made him believe he could be. Lily was more than just a childhood friend. She was his axis. And when he lost her, his compass shattered, and he became a man condemned to live in shadows. Snape's earliest memories of Lily are sunlit. She was brightness in his life long before Hogwarts, long before the war, before the masks and the double lives. When they met as children in the fields near Spinner's End, Lily's laughter broke through the grey, industrial monotony that surrounded his home. Severus saw in her something pure, something free, something that did not judge his ragged clothes or his awkwardness. She was magic before magic had even begun. At Hogwarts their worlds expanded, but their paths began to diverge. Lily, with her firm moral compass, was sorted into Gryffindor. Severus, drawn perhaps by the undercurrents of power and control he had never known at home, fell into Slytherin. And yet he tried to hold on to her, even as his house pulled him toward darker corridors. Lily stood firm in the light, and Snape teetered on the edge of a cliff, believing he could straddle both worlds. He had friends in Slytherin, Mulciber, Avery, and others, boys whose idea of fun was hexing first years and sneering at Muggle-borns. Lily hated them. She told him so more than once. "They're your friends, but they're not good people, Sev," she had said, and he had listened. That's what people miss when they talk about Snape's dissent. He listened to Lily. He didn't brush off her concerns. He defended her, but he didn't act on her warnings as fully as he should have. and he made excuses for the boys who mirrored his own insecurities. Still, the effort was there. He avoided the worst of the curses when she was around. He tried to spend time with her during breaks, waiting by the lake or in the library. He even began studying more seriously, not for power, but because he knew Lily valued knowledge used for good. For a time, it seemed possible that he might change, that he could distance himself from the worst influences in his house, that the boy who came from nothing could build something brighter. But darkness is patient. It doesn't need to rush, and Snape was vulnerable, isolated, ashamed of his background, hungry for power because he had grown up with none. Voldemort's whispers found willing ears among the Slytherin students, and while Snape never outright celebrated the ideology, he flirted with its promises. He told himself it was all temporary, that this exploration of the dark arts was just an intellectual pursuit, a stepping stone. He would master them, outgrow them, and then one day Lily would understand. What he failed to see was that every compromise took him one step further from her. Lily was growing too, becoming more confident, more assertive, and finding companionship with people who lived in the sunlight rather than in its shadow. James Potter, arrogant and brash though he was, stood firmly against the darkness rising in the world. Lily noticed. She noticed how James and his friends stood up for others, even at personal cost. Meanwhile, Snape kept silent too often, and silence in the face of cruelty was something Lily could not forgive forever. The breaking point came not with a curse or a spell, but with a word, a single slur, hurled in bitterness and shame after James Potter humiliated Severus in front of a crowd. Mudblood, it was venom, the kind of word that reveals rot not only in society but in the soul of the speaker. And it wasn't just the word, it was what it confirmed, that the people Snape surrounded himself with, the ideologies he dabbled in, were not separate from him. They were part of him, or at least that's how Lily saw it. Afterward he tried to apologize, he begged, but Lily had reached her limit. In the Order of the Phoenix, we hear her words in the memory Harry sees. I've made excuses for you for years. None of my friends can understand why I even talk to you. You and your precious little Death Eater friends, you see, you don't even deny it. You call everyone of my birth Mudblood Severus. Why should I be any different? It wasn't just the word. It was the final confirmation of a truth she could no longer ignore, and Snape, who had spent years believing he could walk both paths, realized that the bridge was gone. She was gone. And so he gave in. He did not become a Death Eater out of loyalty to Voldemort. He became one because there was nothing left, because he had already lost the one person who might have pulled him back. It was a surrender, not a choice, a collapse, not a leap. But there are fragments in the narrative, tiny details that reveal just how hard he had tried to be someone else for her. He didn't brag about his dark arts knowledge when she was around. He hesitated when Mulciber suggested using dark magic on other students. He sought her opinion in private, hoping to hear her approval. He even became interested in potions, Lily's favorite subject, because it gave them something to talk about, something to share beyond the war of houses. When Snape joined the Death Eaters, he told himself it was a way to grow stronger, to protect her somehow with power, that it would give him the strength to shield her from the coming storm. But Voldemort's ideology did not spare exceptions. When he heard that Lily and James were being targeted, he did the unthinkable. He went to Dumbledore, not to save James, not to save Harry, just to save her. And when she died anyway, when Voldemort marked the Potters and Lily's body was found protecting her infant son, something in Severus Snape broke beyond repair. In the Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore says, "You disgust me," when Snape pleads only for Lily's life, and Snape replies, "Fine, fine, but never speak of the boy again." And yet he spends the next 17 years protecting Harry, because even though Lily was gone, the part of him that tried to be better for her remained. Snape's every step afterward was a punishment and a promise. He lived in self-imposed penance, spying on the darkest wizard of their age, while tethered to a school full of people who misunderstood and despised him. He endured humiliation, danger, and loneliness, not because he believed he deserved redemption, but because he believed Lily deserved justice. And he never tried to make Harry like him. That's crucial. He didn't seek sympathy or understanding, because his love for Lily was never about himself. It wasn't about winning her back or proving himself to anyone. It was the kind of love that demanded suffering in silence if it meant protecting what remained of her in the world. When he died, cradled on the floor of the shrieking shack, he didn't ask for praise. He asked only for Harry to look at him, perhaps the only moment in the series when Severus is truly vulnerable. Look at me, because Harry had her eyes. And maybe, in that final breath, he saw the girl he had lost and the boy he had protected, both at once. What makes Snape's attempt at change so tragic is not that he failed, it's that he was too late. The story of Severus Snape and Lily Evans is not about redemption won. It is about redemption chased at a cost that grew higher every year. It is about the moments that might have gone differently if pride, shame, or fear had not intervened. And it is a reminder that becoming better is not always enough. Sometimes it has to happen in time. There are no easy absolutes in Snape's life. He was cruel. He was brave. He was petty and selfless, both. But beneath every choice, there was a heartbeat shaped by Lily's absence. Every potion he brewed, every lie he told Voldemort, every bitter word he spit in the classroom, it all came from the echo of a life he once hoped he could have with her. Snape never married, never sought companionship again. His patronus remained a doe, Lily's patronus, until the day he died. It was not a symbol of romantic obsession, but of unwavering memory. In the Deathly Hallows, when Dumbledore sees the patronus, he whispers, "After all this time?" And Snape answers, "Always." That one word contains everything, the hope, the sorrow, the transformation that came too late. And so we are left with the haunting truth that Severus Snape tried to change, not for glory, not for power, but for the one person who made him believe there was another path. And though the world only saw the mask, the bitterness and the cold, the boy who once sat by the river with a red-haired girl never entirely disappeared. He was just buried beneath the weight of what could have been. Number 20, Lily's death became a point of no return. When Severus Snape collapsed in front of Albus Dumbledore and begged him to save Lily Potter, he was not the man we knew at Hogwarts. He was not the cold potions master, the sarcastic professor with a shadowed face and bitter tongue. He was simply a broken soul who had gambled with darkness and lost the only light in his life. The death of Lily was not a turning point for Snape. It was the annihilation of every path he could have ever taken, save one, to serve her memory in silence, in pain, in penance. It was not heroism, it was not redemption, it was grief stretched into a lifetime. Before her death, Severus had walked a dangerous line. He had chosen the dark arts, enticed by power, seduced by a place in a world that seemed to finally value him. But he had also chosen to love, fully and devastatingly, the one person who had never laughed at his greasy hair or second-hand clothes, Lily Evans. Their paths diverged when he let hate speak louder than love, when he called her mudblood in a fit of wounded pride. She had walked away, and he had let her go. Not because he didn't love her, but because he didn't know how to love himself. And then she died. Not in the abstract way people talk about loss, not in the passive blur of time. Lily Evans was murdered, and her death was the direct result of a prophecy that Severus Snape had delivered into Voldemort's hands. The guilt was not metaphorical, it was intimate and precise. The Dark Lord had asked him to spy on Dumbledore, and Severus had done so. He had heard the prophecy and passed it along, never thinking it would mark Lily, never imagining the Dark Lord would see a threat in a baby. But Voldemort did, and Snape understood, far too late, that his actions were not strategic, not clever, not part of some grand ideological chessboard. They were ruinous. The moment Snape learned that Lily had been targeted, he ran to Dumbledore. Not as a follower of Voldemort seeking protection, but as a man who had just realized he had handed his heart over to be murdered. "Hide them all, then," he had said. "Keep her, them, safe." Please. He could barely speak. He was not asking for justice. He was begging for mercy. For the first time, Snape revealed himself not as a servant of either side, but as a man who had tried to walk between worlds and lost the only person who had ever believed he could belong in the light. But Dumbledore could not change fate. And Lily died anyway. Her death did not transform Severus into a hero. It destroyed him. "You disgust me," Dumbledore had said when Snape pleaded for her safety, but not her son's. And perhaps he deserved that scorn. But from that moment on, Snape's entire life became an offering, not to Voldemort, not to Dumbledore, not even to Harry, but to Lily. He became a double agent, not to save the world, but to whisper into the void, "I'm sorry." Every day of his life from that point on was a repetition of that apology. He joined the Order of the Phoenix, not because he believed in their cause, but because Lily had believed in it. He watched over Harry not because he cared for the boy. In fact, he despised how much Harry reminded him of James, but because Lily had died to protect him. That was enough. His disdain for Harry was not simple cruelty. It was the unbearable collision of two memories, the face of Lily, whose eyes Harry inherited, and the face of James, the boy who had humiliated Severus in public and taken Lily away in private. Snape's hatred and love wove into one another in impossible knots, which is why his guardianship was never gentle, but always vigilant. "He has her eyes," Snape would mutter, and it wasn't a compliment. It was a wound that never healed. When he killed Albus Dumbledore on top of the astronomy tower, the world saw a traitor. But Snape had made a pact with Dumbledore long before that moment, a pact rooted in death and secrecy. "You must be the one to kill me, Severus," Dumbledore had insisted, and Snape had resisted, not because he feared the act, but because his soul had already shouldered too much. Dumbledore had seen the truth. Snape's loyalty, painful and unwavering, was not born of ideology or bravery. It was born of love, so bitter that even Voldemort had underestimated it. Snape's patronus, the silvery doe, mirrored Lily's, a symbol so potent that it stunned Dumbledore into silence when he first saw it. "After all this time?" he asked. "Always," replied Snape. The single word, spare and sorrowful, became his confession. He had never stopped loving her. He never would. In the moments others would call triumph or sacrifice, Snape saw only a shadow of what he had lost. The final year of Snape's life was lived on a knife's edge. Appointed headmaster of Hogwarts by Voldemort's regime, he appeared to have crossed a line no one could return from. But beneath that facade, Snape protected students in secret, undermined Death Eaters when he could, and held the school together by sheer will. He had no allies, no praise, only ghosts. Even Harry only understood Snape's truth when it was too late. In The Prince's Tale, the memories that spilled from the dying man's mind were not political strategy or battle plans. They were glimpses of Lily, her laughter, her kindness, her anger, her heartbreak. In one of the most devastating scenes in the series, Harry sees a boy crying on a swing, alone in a playground, watching the only person who ever made him feel like he belonged. That boy would go on to serve two masters, betray one, and die for the other. All for love. Snape did not want to live in a world without Lily, but he did. He lived and suffered and fought because her memory demanded it. She had given her life for her son, and so Severus gave his for her cause, not because he believed in Harry, but because he believed in Lily. Her final act of sacrifice was mirrored by his, not with a wand in hand, but with secrets in his blood and a snake at his throat. The core of Snape's transformation was not redemption, but mourning. He was not trying to be forgiven. He knew Lily would never forgive him. He was simply trying to make sure her death was not meaningless. And so he became a man who existed in the shadow of what might have been, his robes always black, his expression unreadable, his classroom cold. Every detail was part of his mourning ritual, a private funeral held over years. Snape's tragedy was not that he died unloved, it was that he lived unloved, misunderstood by all, because the only person who had ever seen his heart was gone. When Harry named his son Albus Severus Potter and called Snape the bravest man I ever knew, it was not just an act of respect, it was a final absolution, long overdue, given not by Lily, but by the one who carried her eyes. Snape never asked for that honor. He had spent his life paying a price no one demanded. He protected the son of his rival. He betrayed the master who trusted him. He bore the suspicion of the good and the admiration of the wicked. He walked alone, holding on to nothing but the memory of a girl who once sat beside him by the river and talked about magic and possibility. He never returned to the home where he grew up. He never spoke of his past unless it was to Dumbledore, and even then he kept most of it locked away. The death of Lily was not a chapter in his life, it was the ending. Everything after that was postscript, the war, the espionage, the final battle. All of it was shaped by one irreparable act, a woman with green eyes falling to protect her son, and a man who realized, too late, that he had lost her long before she died. Snape's story, though marked by cruelty and bitterness, is ultimately a love story in disguise. Not the kind where love is returned and celebrated, but the kind where love is carved into the soul and never fades, even in the face of death. That is why his final act, giving Harry the truth about Voldemort, the Elder Wand, and the final Horcrux, it was not a gesture of duty. It was the culmination of everything he had endured. It was Lily's name on his lips and Harry's life in his hands. There are many characters in the Harry Potter series who are heroic, but only Snape embodies the kind of heroism that comes not from power or courage, but from grief. He is the man who chose to suffer in silence so that others could live. He is the man who did not ask to be forgiven, but earned it anyway. When we look back at Snape's arc, it's easy to get lost in the ambiguity, the cruelty, the favoritism, the rage. But if we understand him through Lily, the picture becomes painfully clear. Every insult hurled at Harry, every act of protection, every moment of hesitation. It was not about the war, it was about her. Lily was Snape's axis. When she died, his world did not spin. It stopped. And in that silence he chose a path that no one else could have taken, not because it was noble, but because it was all he had left. Number 21. Snape helped Lily in secret, even after their fallout. Severus Snape was not a man known for mercy. He was not remembered by Hogwarts students for kindness, and even those who admired his skills rarely spoke of his compassion. Yet buried beneath the layers of his dark robes and his colder-than-dungeon demeanor lived a boy who had once watched the red-haired girl beside him wave her wand for the first time. A boy who had once taught her about the wizarding world with shaking hands and a heart full of hope. That boy never fully died, even when his friendship with Lily Evans lay shattered after the infamous scene beside the lake. The castle held secrets. Among them, one of the deepest was how Snape, brilliant, bitter, and broken, never stopped protecting the girl he had loved. It was widely known that after Snape called Lily a mudblood, in a moment of pride and fury, their friendship never recovered. Lily, with her unshakable sense of right and wrong, walked away from him, and Severus never found the road back. But just because she left him behind didn't mean he stopped walking beside her in secret. He knew too much about the dangers of the magical world. He knew too much about the cruelty that Slytherins like Mulciber and Avery could unleash. And he knew too much about Lily Evans's refusal to back down. During 6th year, something strange began happening in Hogwarts, something small, untraceable, but consistent. Lily Evans, known for clashing with Slytherins who mocked her blood status or her friends, began escaping some very close calls. A transfiguration assignment gone wrong exploded across the corridor, but the magic was softened, turned to smoke instead of fire. Lily's robes were untouched, though the stone floor bore the marks of what should have been a brutal curse. In the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey remarked that it was as if someone had shielded her a moment before the spell struck. Another time, during a herbology class in the greenhouses, a venomous tentacula lashed out unnaturally, almost with purpose, towards Lily. Moments before the tendril could wrap around her wrist, the plant recoiled as if stunned by an invisible jinx. Professor Sprout stood puzzled, muttering about misbehavior among enchanted flora, while James Potter looked smug as always, as though expecting credit. But Potter's wand remained in his robes, and even Remus Lupin cast him a questioning glance. Unknown to any of them, a figure had lingered near the greenhouse entrance, his dark eyes watching, his presence never noticed. Slughorn, who adored Lily, often complimented her for her natural knack for potions. He would point to her draughts and exclaim, "Brilliant, brilliant, you've got your measurements exact again, my dear." But in the weeks after her break with Snape, there were subtle signs of adjustments. Lily once told Mary MacDonald that her pepper-up potion had developed a richer colour on its own after she forgot to stir clockwise at the critical stage. She chalked it up to luck, but potions don't fix themselves. Severus Snape was a master of the art, and a quiet charm from across the dungeon could alter consistency or enhance potency without detection. Slughorn, though perhaps too polite to acknowledge it, sometimes looked over to Snape's table after praising Lily, his moustache twitching with suspicion. The enchanted corridor near the Slytherin dormitories, known for its biting stair railings and vanishing steps, had long been avoided by non-Slytherins. But one night in October, Lily Evans, chasing after Marlene McKinnon, turned down it by accident. According to Marlene, Lily never made it far. One moment she was a few paces ahead, and the next, Lily stood at the corridor's entrance again, confused but unhurt. Marlene claimed it was a trick of the castle. You know how the staircases mess with you. But Snape had passed by that hallway minutes before. There were defensive spells woven into the very flagstones, ancient quiet magic, a specialty of his. Dumbledore later confirmed in a staff meeting that a student had instinctively placed protective enchantments without saying a name. Minerva McGonagall, a perceptive woman, glanced at Snape's seat. He didn't meet her eyes. It was known among some of the Slytherins that anyone who tried to hex Lily Evans in the corridors began finding their belongings mysteriously tampered with. Rosier's wand once turned back a stinging hex with such force that he earned a week in the hospital wing. Mulciber, infamous for his obsession with dark magic, found his potions book soaked in an acidic mixture that burned away half his notes he'd copied from Snape just weeks earlier. No one could prove who was responsible, and Snape never admitted a word. He merely stopped lending his notes to certain classmates and carried on in silence. His manner was the same as always, cold, calculating, cruel in his words. But behind those words was a quiet war. Lily never thanked him. She didn't know, and that was the point. Snape didn't act out of hope for forgiveness. He acted because somewhere beneath the weight of regret and shame, he still believed she was worth protecting. His guilt had become a duty. Even as she drew closer to James Potter, his sworn rival, Snape didn't interfere. He despised the marauders, especially James, with every fibre of his being. But he never tried to harm Lily's happiness. In fact, when Sirius Black lured Severus toward the Whomping Willow with the intent of revealing Remus Lupin's secret, it was James who pulled him back. Still, one must wonder how quickly the staff found out. It was Snape who, only days later, handed Dumbledore a list of potentially harmful student activities anonymously. The list included behavior patterns, passageways, and a subtle note about James's cloak. As their 7th year began, Lily was appointed head girl. Snape was not given such honours, yet, curiously, she never encountered prank sabotage, not from the Slytherins, Though others in authority, like Marlene McKinnon, found nasty tricks left at their doors, Lily's path remained eerily smooth. Even Filch, who grumbled about everyone, rarely reprimanded her. Peeves, that chaotic poltergeist, once froze mid-air near the library as Lily passed, looking toward the shadows before flying off. A rustling of robes in the distance went unnoticed. Snape's own grades never faltered. He remained the top of his class in nearly every subject but never stepped into the spotlight. Slughorn continued to invite Lily to his Slug Club gatherings and ignored Snape unless his talent demanded attention. Once, during a Christmas party, Snape slipped out early. What no one noticed was the moment just before Lily had nearly tripped on a spilled goblet of elf-made wine. It never reached her. The floor beneath it shimmered and the wine froze in place, hovering just inches from her shoe. She blinked, confused, and then shrugged. But from the shadows near the door, Snape had already turned to leave. Lily's final year was full of tension as the world outside darkened. Voldemort's name was spreading like a shadow. Snape was already drifting toward the Death Eaters. But even as he wore that mask in public, his actions behind the scenes suggested a man who had not yet sealed his soul. He never mentioned Lily's name to his new allies. He never suggested her as a target. When rumors swirled that Muggleborns were being watched, Lily's name was absent from the list. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps someone was interfering with the flow of information. Later, Dumbledore would say, "You disgust me." But it was not until years after school that Snape came begging for Lily's life. "Hide them all, then. Keep them safe, please," he whispered. But the truth is, Severus had been trying to keep her safe long before that desperate plea. He just did it, from behind veils of resentment and robes of coldness. When Lily died, Snape changed, not just in loyalty but in purpose. He joined Dumbledore not out of ambition but out of loss. He told the headmaster, "You know how and why she died. Make sure it was not in vain." But that vow was built on years of silent protection. He had already been doing that, making sure Lily's path through Hogwarts was as safe as he could manage without being seen. One wonders if Lily ever suspected she was clever. She knew people. Did she ever pause after a narrow escape and think of the boy she once walked beside down Spinner's End? Did she ever consider that Severus Snape, who had failed her in words, might have tried to redeem himself in actions? There's no mention in her letters, but people do not always write what they suspect. Some thoughts stay behind the eyes, never voiced. The castle remembers. Hogwarts holds echoes. If its walls could speak, they might whisper of moments when dark magic twisted away from Lily Evans, when hidden enchantments guided her steps, when a boy cloaked in bitterness lingered just out of sight. And they might say what the books never confirmed, that Severus Snape, for all his failures, never stopped loving her, not in words, but in every silent act of protection he could offer. And so the story of Lily and Severus becomes more than a tale of broken friendship. It becomes a haunting portrait of devotion, of a man who, in losing her, became her secret guardian. In the quietest corners of the castle, that truth remains, buried like a memory spell, hidden like a shield charm cast without a trace. Number 22, Lily was the last person who saw good in Snape. There is a moment in every tragedy when the world turns its back on the hero, when even the sky seems silent in the face of their pain. For Severus Snape, that moment came not with Voldemort's rise, nor with Dumbledore's fall, but in the quiet breaking of a bond that had once tethered him to the light. When Lily Evans turned away, she took with her not just the warmth of childhood friendship, but the last lingering hope that Severus might one day rise above the shadows he was beginning to embrace. It is easy to forget, in the thick, grey fog of Snape's adult bitterness, that there was once someone who believed in him. Lily was not blind to Severus's flaws, far from it, but she saw something no one else dared to name, his potential for goodness. While James Potter laughed and hexed, and Sirius mocked with aristocratic cruelty, Lily looked into Severus's troubled eyes and saw the frightened, brilliant boy behind them. She didn't turn away when the other Gryffindors whispered about Snape's friends dabbling in dark magic. She didn't abandon him the first time he used the word mudblood. She faltered, she grieved, but she tried longer than anyone else would have. In their final confrontation before their friendship ended, it was not anger that rang loudest in Lily's words, it was sorrow. "But you call every one of my birth mudblood, Severus. Why should I be any different?" Her voice, gentle and pained, struck at the very heart of his self-deception. She wasn't accusing him. She was pleading with him, pleading for him to remember who he used to be. That she could still call him Sev at all in those last days was a testament to the stubborn hope she carried. She was still hoping he would come back. The tragedy lies not just in what Severus chose, but in how few choices he felt he had. He had grown up in a house where love was rationed and violence came without reason. Lily was his first warmth, his first safe harbour. He showed her the secret places in the forest, the secrets of wand lore, the oddities of potion ingredients that others dismissed. In return, she gave him laughter, encouragement, and belief. She called him brilliant when no one else cared. She challenged his growing allegiance to darker forces not with condemnation, but with confusion, genuine confusion that someone she trusted so deeply could become someone she didn't recognize. Even after Snape began associating with future Death Eaters, Mulciber and Avery, boys who practiced dark spells in the shadows of the Forbidden Forest, Lily held on. She questioned, she worried, but she stayed. Others walked away, others feared, but Lily stayed, and in staying she became something more than a friend. She became his conscience. In many ways, she was the only one he ever allowed to see his full self, not just the angry teenager, but the frightened boy, the eager learner, the flawed but human soul beneath the robes. That's what made her final departure so cataclysmic for him. When she walked away after his slur, she didn't just remove herself from his life, she severed the only line he had to his better nature. Dumbledore, years later, could speak of remorse and second chances, but Dumbledore had not seen Snape in the years between. He had not watched the way Severus hollowed out, turned bitterness into armor, and wore his guilt like a brand across his soul. Lily had been the only one who didn't see him as just a Slytherin, or just a poor boy from Spinner's End, or just a servant of Voldemort. She saw the boy who showed her how to float a leaf in mid-air before they were even 11. And it's not just that she saw the good, it's that she voiced it. "You're not like them," she once told him. You're you." Those words weren't flattery. They were a reminder, a lifeline, one he clung to desperately until he finally snapped it himself with that one poisoned word. And even then, when she turned and walked away, he ran after her. Not for show, not to win her back, but because something inside him knew he had just destroyed the only part of his life that made him human. No one else ever called him Sev again. The name was a soft echo of who he had once been, a name used by the one person who had seen him not as predator or pawn, but as person. In the years that followed, Snape became something colder, harder. He developed a precision in speech, a cruelty in demeanor, a detachment so surgical it could make even students flinch under his gaze. But behind all that there was a single, burning memory of a girl with red hair who once called him her best friend. Even in death, that memory consumed him. "You disgust me," he spat at Harry again and again, but in his final breath it was not hatred that won, it was love. "Look at me," he whispered, his eyes searching for Lily's in the boy's face. Because Lily was the last person who ever saw the good in him, and that goodness died with her, buried deep beneath layers of regret, duty, and unspoken longing. It is important to understand that Snape did not stop loving Lily when she died. Nor did he love her only because she was kind. He loved her because she reminded him of who he could have been. Her belief in him was not naive. She wasn't blind to his choices. She was simply unwilling to believe he was beyond redemption. And that belief lingered in him like a ghost. No one else offered him that. To the students at Hogwarts he was a tyrant, to the Death Eaters a double agent, to Dumbledore a necessary risk. But to Lily he had been Severus, a boy worth saving. When Harry asked Dumbledore after all this time, and Dumbledore replied, "Always," he wasn't just affirming Snape's love, he was acknowledging its purity, its desperation, and its unbreakable tie to the girl who saw light in the shadows. And that is why he could never forgive himself. Not for the slur, not even for joining the Death Eaters, but for failing her belief in him. He had been her friend, her confidant, and in the end, her betrayal. That shame never left him. It twisted into a lifetime of penance. Every time he protected Harry, it was not out of affection, it was an offering to the ghost of Lily's trust. Every potion he brewed, every threat he uttered to keep Harry safe was a silent prayer that maybe, somewhere beyond the veil, she saw. Lily had not been a saint. She had her pride, her anger, her boundaries. But her forgiveness was powerful, and her loss was shattering. There is no record of anyone else ever seeing that same good in Snape again. No other friend, no other mentor. Not even the Order of the Phoenix, who trusted him begrudgingly. They saw a spy. Lily had seen a soul. In many ways, Snape's death was not the end of his story. It was the final chapter in a life defined by a single choice, to honor the faith of the last person who believed in him. Her memory shaped every decision he made. After her death, he remained a servant to her hope, a guardian of her legacy. And in doing so, he became a man forged not by glory, but by quiet grief. When Harry named his son Albus Severus, he did not just honor a brave man, he honored the brokenness of a life lived in the long shadow of a lost friendship. He honored the reality that sometimes the strongest good comes not from being loved by many, but from being truly believed in by one. And Lily Evans was that one. Number 23. Severus wanted to be part of her world, but remained outside. Severus Snape never truly entered Lily Evans's world. He stood at its borders, watching, wanting, aching to belong, but always, inevitably, remaining apart. The story of their relationship is not one of shared light, but of contrast. She shone, and he lingered in shadow. From their earliest days, Severus was drawn to her as a moth to a flame, yet could never find a way to truly live in her warmth. That separation, invisible at first, grew over time, fed by class, ideology, pride, and pain, until it became an impassable gulf. Even before they arrived at Hogwarts, the difference between them was clear. Severus, a half-blood boy from Spinner's End, carried the gloom of his surroundings like a second skin. His clothes were mismatched, his hair perpetually greasy, his face often closed and watchful. He spoke in measured tones, eyes darting, always assessing. Lily, on the other hand, was spring itself, bright, expressive, laughing, without restraint. When they first met, he showed her the hidden world of magic. Yes, but she showed him what life could be like if one were truly free within it. For a time, they stood close, almost equals, two children discovering their place in something vast and enchanted. But the seeds of difference were already planted. At Hogwarts, those seeds quickly took root. Lily, a Muggle-born witch of exceptional talent and charm, was sorted into Gryffindor and surrounded by warmth, popularity, and admiration. She excelled not only in spells, but in social grace. Everyone liked Lily. She was invited, included, embraced. Severus, placed in Slytherin, found coldness. He was clever, yes, brilliant even, but odd. His obsession with the dark arts set him apart. His bitterness, even as a boy, made others wary. While Lily danced through common rooms and sunlit courtyards, Severus haunted dungeons and corners, always watching her from afar. Still, for a while, they remained friends, a strange pair, so different in temperament and circle, but connected by early memory, by the shared secret of magic discovered together. But the connection was fragile. "You're not still hanging around with that Snape boy, are you?" Petunia had once sneered. And even at Hogwarts, others whispered. Gryffindors looked down on him. Slytherins questioned his loyalty. Severus felt the tension acutely. Every time he saw Lily talking easily with James Potter or Sirius Black, he felt a flicker of resentment, not only toward them, but toward her ability to belong where he could not. Lily moved with ease through the social landscape of the school. Severus stalked its margins. The difference was more than social, it was emotional. She opened herself to others, trusted them, offered kindness. He was guarded, defensive. He wanted her world, but could not mimic its language. In The Prince's Tale, the pensive shows us a memory, a young Severus watching Lily talk to others, remaining silent, his gaze fixed on her as though she were something unattainable. That moment, brief and quiet, says more than pages of dialogue. He wasn't with her. He was watching her be with others, and that's where he would remain. When he joined the circle of future Death Eaters, it wasn't only about ideology. It was also about finding a place, any place, where he might be respected. But the price was high. Lily loathed the dark arts. She despised the cruelty, the bigotry, the disdain for Muggle-borns. And Severus, unable to let go of his new alliances, began to lose her. He wanted her, yes, but he also wanted power, recognition, control over a life that had always felt out of his hands. "But you call everyone of my birth mudblood, Severus. Why should I be any different?" she said. In that sentence, the world he wanted and the world he chose collided, and she turned from him. That single word, mudblood, was the breaking point. In that hallway scene, when he screams the slur at her, his face contorted with fury and shame, we see the raw contradiction inside him. He loves her, but he hates the vulnerability that love demands. He wants her respect, but he spits the word that ends it. And afterward, when he tries to apologize, it's too late. "I can't pretend anymore," Lily tells him. And she doesn't. The door closes. Severus is left outside, not only literally, but symbolically. She moves on. He stays. She becomes part of something larger, fighting against Voldemort, marrying James, becoming a mother. Severus dives deeper into shadows. He becomes the spy, the double agent, the half-man bent by sorrow. But even then, even when years had passed and she had died, he could not let her go. Always, he told Dumbledore, a single word, but beneath it, a lifetime of haunting. He had never been part of her world, not truly, but he had never stopped believing that he should have been. Their story is one of emotional imbalance. Lily gave him kindness, but not the intimacy he craved. Severus offered loyalty, but not the gentleness she needed. He wanted her to choose him, to lift him from the darkness, but she never could. She loved him as a friend, as a childhood companion, but not as a partner. He, meanwhile, loved her with a desperation that bordered on possession. Even after her death, he held on to the idea of her like a relic. Not Lily the person, but Lily the symbol, the thing he could never quite reach. In many ways, Severus's tragedy was rooted in misalignment. He reached for her from a place of pain, while she moved from a place of light. He saw her as salvation. She saw him as someone to save, until she couldn't anymore. When she walked away, he didn't just lose a friend. He lost the dream of being part of something better. From that moment on, he lived in a half-life, protecting her son, serving a cause he'd once opposed, keeping his love hidden like a wound that never healed. What makes the story devastating is how much of it is built on silence. Severus never told Lily how deeply he loved her. Lily never knew the full extent of his devotion. And when she died thinking of Harry, James, her family. Not Severus. He was never included in that final picture. His love didn't save her. It couldn't. He wasn't part of her world when she lived, and he wasn't part of her ending either. He was the man who stood outside, watching the door close. In The Prince's Tale, J.K. Rowling gives us the truth behind the sneer. We see the boy behind the bitterness, the man behind the menace. and we see most painfully how often he is alone. Even in the pensive, he rarely speaks, he watches, he follows. He hides behind trees, behind walls, behind masks. The story of Severus and Lily is told not through shared joy, but through his solitude. He is a figure in the background, a ghost in someone else's memory. The ultimate proof of his exclusion comes in his relationship with Harry. He protects him, not for who he is, but for whose son he is, the son of Lily Evans, the woman he could never stop loving, and yet he treats Harry with disdain, unable to separate the boy from his father, from his own heartbreak. "You have your mother's eyes," Dumbledore tells Harry again and again. And for Severus, those eyes are a curse and a reminder, a window into a world he couldn't enter, even in death. Severus's tragedy lies in constancy. He never moved on. Where Lily grew, changed, loved, died, he stayed in place, fixed on a memory. He chose to love her without being loved in return, and he chose to protect her child, knowing that no one would ever know why. That is both noble and unbearable, the kind of love that asks nothing, takes nothing, and leaves everything burning. There is an irony in his life that cannot be escaped. Severus Snape, the man who wanted so badly to be included, became the one whose sacrifice was hidden. He didn't get the statues, the songs, the celebrations. His love was buried in silence, his loyalty misunderstood. But perhaps that's how he would have wanted it, to be remembered not for what he achieved, but for what he endured. To love someone so deeply that you disappear behind it. Lily Evans never saw the full shape of his devotion. She didn't see him die, she didn't hear his last words. She didn't know that he watched over her son all those years, while hiding behind cruelty and coldness. But maybe, in another life, she might have turned and seen him standing there, always behind her, always waiting. And maybe she would have said, "I know." But she didn't. And so Severus Snape remained what he always was, on the edge of the light, never within it. He wanted her world, her joy, her warmth. He wanted to be chosen, but he could only ever watch her from the shadows, the boy who taught her magic and then lost her to it. In the end, Snape's story isn't just about unrequited love. It's about the spaces between people, about what's said too late or never said at all, about how wanting to belong doesn't mean you will. His was a heart chained by longing, defined by what he could not have. And that is why when he says always, it is not a promise, it is a confession, a whisper from a place he was never invited to enter. Number 24. Harry became the final reminder of Lily. In the dimly lit halls of Hogwarts, under the flickering torchlight that cast long shadows on ancient stone, Severus Snape walked with a heaviness he never showed. Students whispered of his cruelty, of his harshness in potions class, of his sneering contempt especially reserved for Harry Potter. But beneath the black robes, past the curtain of greasy hair, was a man haunted, not by ghosts, but by a pair of green eyes that refused to let him forget. They were Lily's eyes. Snape claimed to despise the boy. He punished him mercilessly for every infraction, docked points from Gryffindor before explanations could be offered, and seemed to revel in embarrassing him. But Harry, though too young to understand, had always felt something strange in those cold black eyes when they met his own. There was something more than hatred there, something heavy, conflicted, restrained. The reason was simple and devastating. Harry Potter, the boy Snape should have loathed above all others, had inherited his mother's eyes. It was not a poetic metaphor, it was a literal, inescapable truth. "You have your mother's eyes," characters would repeat throughout the books, from Remus Lupin to Sirius Black, from Dumbledore to Slughorn. But to Snape, it was not just an observation, it was a wound that never closed. Every time Harry looked up at him, whether defiantly or innocently, it was as though Lily Evans herself was looking back from another lifetime. Snape's bitterness towards Harry was fed by the resemblance he bore to James Potter, the same messy black hair, the same smug confidence, the same reckless bravery. But Harry's green eyes betrayed the illusion. They cut through the image of James like sunlight through mist and revealed the boy's mother in his gaze. That contradiction enraged Snape because it confused the lines he tried to draw around his hatred. Snape had every reason to hate James. James bullied him, mocked him, humiliated him in front of Lily. James took the one thing Severus had ever cherished and turned her against him. But Lily was never supposed to be part of that anger. She was separate, sacred. And when she died, her memory became something that Severus guarded with obsessive devotion. He did not merely mourn her, he revered her, preserved her image like a relic in a temple of grief. When Voldemort marked the Potters for death, Snape begged for Lily's life, not James's, not Harry's, only hers. That cruel specificity would torment him later, because she died anyway, and the boy she died to protect survived, marked by a curse and a scar, a symbol of triumph and tragedy. And worse than surviving, he thrived in a world that treated him like a hero, while Snape rotted in guilt and shadows. But then came the eyes. Those eyes were like a spell that tethered him to Lily's memory. Dumbledore knew it and used it. When he asked Snape to protect the boy, it was not for Harry's sake, but for Lily's. Snape agreed, not because he cared for the boy, but because he could not say no to the last living fragment of her existence. It was the unspoken truth behind his reluctant guardianship. For her, he had said to Dumbledore, always. That word, always, would echo across the years. It was not mere sentiment, it was a vow etched in the marrow of his being. It meant that Snape would carry his grief like armor, wield it like a sword, and bleed for it until the end. He watched over Harry not with kindness, but with the grim duty of a soldier stationed at the grave of someone they failed to protect. He kept Harry alive not out of love for the boy, but out of love for the woman who once loved him. And yet, there were cracks in that armor. Moments when the hatred faltered and something else flickered behind Snape's eyes. When Harry lay unconscious in the hospital wing, Snape stood vigil longer than necessary. When Umbridge threatened to use Veritaserum on Harry, Snape gave her a fake potion. When Draco Malfoy failed to kill Dumbledore and the plan fell apart, it was Snape who dragged Harry to safety in the chaos. These were not the actions of a man indifferent to the boy's fate, but perhaps the clearest moment came much earlier, on the very night that Harry was sorted into Gryffindor. Snape could have refused him aid, could have let him flounder, could have ignored the child completely, but he didn't. He took one look at the boy, and instead of turning away, he stepped into a role he never wanted: protector. He would torment Harry, yes, but he would also protect him. And that contradiction defined Snape's every action thereafter. Like a pendulum swinging between contempt and obligation, Snape moved through the years bound by a promise and broken by it. Each time Harry reminded him of James, he recoiled. Each time he reminded him of Lily, he endured. When Harry performed well in potions, Snape belittled him. But when Harry was endangered, Snape appeared like a spectre from the shadows to ensure his survival. He called him arrogant, just like James, but his eyes lingered when Harry showed mercy. He flinched when Harry said cruel things, as though Lily might hear them from beyond the veil. The boy's very existence was an emotional siege upon Snape's fractured soul. And then there was the night in the Shrieking Shack. When Sirius and Remus revealed the truth about Peter Pettigrew, Snape refused to believe them, not because he trusted Pettigrew, but because he could not bring himself to align with Sirius, who had been James's closest friend. But once the truth became undeniable, he did not take vengeance. He didn't attack Harry for defending Sirius. He didn't punish him for disarming a teacher. He simply watched, silent, torn. The war escalated. Danger circled the castle like wolves. Snape's double life grew more perilous, but the eyes never left him. Every time Harry crossed his path, they burned into him. He hated them. He needed them. He wished them gone, yet clung to their presence. For in those green depths lived Lily's soul, not her body, not her voice, but her echo. And that echo kept Snape tethered to something human. Dumbledore knew Snape's heart better than anyone. He used it to manipulate him. He called Snape's love for Lily a great strength, but it was also a great curse. When Dumbledore revealed that Harry was destined to die, that his death was part of the plan, Snape exploded. "You have kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment," he snarled, and then, almost trembling, he added, "He has her eyes." That was the breaking point. That was the moment when Snape became more than a bitter guardian. He became a man willing to die for the son of his enemy because in doing so, he could honor the woman he loved. He agreed to protect Harry even from the truth. He agreed to deliver the sword, to leave clues, to mislead Voldemort at every turn, all because of those eyes. And when death finally came for Severus Snape, it did so not on a battlefield, but on the floor of the shrieking shack, poisoned by Voldemort's snake, betrayed by the very master he served. As he lay dying, blood pooling around him, he had one final request. "Look at me," he said to Harry. "Not forgive me, not remember me, not tell them the truth. Look at me," because he needed to see Lily's eyes one last time before the darkness took him. It was not a gesture for Harry. It was not about closure. It was a dying man reaching across time and memory to touch something sacred. He saw in Harry what he had lost and what he had preserved, a flicker of green in a world that had grown cold, a final mercy, final glance. Snape's memories passed to Harry through the pensieve, revealed the truth. Not a cold-blooded spy, not a simple villain, but a man torn apart by love, guilt, and duty. A man who could not love the boy, but could love what the boy reminded him of. A man who died not for a cause, but for a face. Harry understood, perhaps too late. When he named his second son Albus Severus Potter, he said the words that no one had expected. "He was the bravest man I ever knew." And maybe that bravery was born not from strength, but from pain, from waking each day and choosing to protect the boy with the green eyes, even when it hurt, because in those eyes lived Lily, and Lily was the only thing that Severus Snape ever truly loved. Number 25. Snape knew everything about Lily, even after her death. Severus Snape never stopped loving Lily Evans. Even long after her death, he preserved her memory with a devotion that bordered on sacred ritual. It was not merely nostalgia or lingering guilt that tied him to her. It was a relentless pursuit to keep every piece of her existence intact, as if she might vanish entirely if he didn't remember it all. Snape didn't just grieve. He archived. He collected fragments of her life with the precision of a historian and the reverence of a worshipper. He knew what books she loved to read. The floral-scented pages of the Tales of Beedle the Bard once lay in her hands, and Severus traced the very same edition in the Hogwarts library, borrowing it under a false name during his time as a professor. He lingered over the marginalia she'd written in her teenage hand, even if the book wasn't technically hers. If there was even a remote possibility that she had once turned its pages, that was enough. He remembered the way she used to hum when she concentrated, a small, unconscious tune that had no lyrics, just a soft melody that made even dreary potions lessons bearable. After her death, he found himself listening for it in the halls of Hogwarts, as if some whisper of her spirit remained, echoing between the stone walls. Of course it never came, but Severus knew it by heart. He hummed it to himself when he was alone, especially in his office late at night when grief had its strongest grip. He found out, through Minerva McGonagall, that Lily had called Harry "my little stag" once, laughing at the boy's tufts of hair that always stood up at odd angles, just like James. Snape clenched his jaw at that. James's legacy was written into Harry's features, but it was Lily's tenderness that gave it warmth. That nickname was never meant for him to know, but he cherished it, hoarded it, like something sacred. He had gone to the trouble of retrieving her records from the school archives. Few people realized that Hogwarts kept such detailed information, letters, essays, personal notes. In a locked drawer in the potions classroom, hidden behind a magical barrier keyed only to his wand, Snape kept copies of Lily's homework, Her first essay on the properties of wolfsbane, still slightly stained with ink. Her thoughts on transfiguration, where she argued against McGonagall's rigid methods with quiet brilliance. Snape even learned how she decorated her home in Godric's Hollow. A subtle inquiry to Bathilda Bagshot, masked as academic interest, revealed details Lily had shared in passing. She had favoured simple aesthetics, lavender flowers by the windowsill, children's drawings on the refrigerator, a shelf of wizarding cookbooks that she never quite mastered. It was painfully ordinary. That was what made it devastating. He could picture it all, down to the sunlit cushions on the old sofa. During his clandestine visits to the Order's old headquarters at Grimmauld Place, Snape came across a photograph. Lily holding Harry at Christmas, her eyes lit by fairy lights. She was wearing the same green jumper she had worn to Slughorn's Christmas party in 5th year. A memory burned into Snape's soul. He didn't take the photo. That would be noticed. But he stared at it for longer than he should have, memorizing every angle of her face. Snape's knowledge wasn't limited to things she did. It extended to what she felt. He knew, from overhearing old conversations, that she had been terrified when Harry got his first fever. Not because of the illness, but because she had seen in that flushed face a glimpse of vulnerability that she couldn't protect from the world. Severus recorded that memory like scripture. Even that small moment of maternal worry became a shrine in his mind. From Dumbledore he learned of a letter Lily had once written, but never sent. It was a simple note of thanks for helping protect Mary MacDonald from Mulciber's cursed spell in 7th year. Lily had decided against sending it, perhaps fearing that any encouragement might revive their broken friendship. Severus was never meant to know of it, but when Dumbledore, half drunk on guilt and fire whiskey, mentioned it in passing one night, Snape stored it away. Not even Dumbledore knew how seriously he had taken that. He read the Muggle books Lily loved growing up. Pride and Prejudice was one of them. She'd once quoted it in a charms essay, and it struck him as odd until he made the connection. So he read it, front to back. And then again. He began to understand the way her mind worked, her sense of justice, her empathy, her love for wit and strength. These were not generic traits, they were pieces of her inner world. He took long walks in the Forbidden Forest at dusk, not for relaxation, but because Lily once told him in their 4th year that the trees looked like paintings at twilight. She had meant it as an offhand comment during a herbology walk, but Snape had remembered. Now, years later, he walked that same path, trying to see what she saw. In moments like those, he didn't feel alone. Snape even knew that Lily had wanted to become a healer at one point, a dream she abandoned in favour of working with magical children. He discovered this through a conversation with Madame Pomfrey, who once mentioned that Lily had shadowed her during the summer between 6th and 7th year. That revelation broke something in him. He had always imagined her as someone untouchable, too perfect. But she had fears and doubts, changed her mind, made new choices. What haunted Snape most were the things Harry never knew about his mother. The lullabies she sang, the scent she left on the pillow, the way she cried at Sirius's imprisonment. Snape knew these things not through magic, but through the painstaking work of piecing together stories. Not all of it was verifiable. Some came from Remus Lupin's scattered recollections, some from scraps of writing left behind in diaries and letters. But Snape remembered it all. When Harry conjured his patronus in 3rd year, a stag, Dumbledore saw Snape's face pale. The irony was unbearable. The doe and the stag, together again, but not as he had ever dreamed. His own patronus, unchanged after all those years, was still hers. Always, he had told Dumbledore. That word carried the weight of 1,000 memories. It was a vow, an anchor, a torment. Snape had memorized Lily's handwriting. He once corrected a first year's essay because a flourish in their G reminded him of Lily's style. The student had no idea why Professor Snape's voice trembled slightly when handing the parchment back. In private, he took out old parchment samples, comparing the loops and swirls. He wasn't comparing for similarity, he was simply remembering. The potions cupboard still held her influence. Snape refused to move a particular vial of dried rose hips, though it hadn't been used in years. It was the same vial Lily had accidentally shattered in 5th year, which he had quietly replaced without telling her. It wasn't sentimentality, it was ritual. That bottle stayed exactly where she had last seen it. He once visited Spinner's End and found an old toy from their childhood, a paper flower she had enchanted to change colours. He had forgotten it existed. But when he touched it, it bloomed into red and gold. He kept it on his desk for a week, unable to bring himself to pack it away again. For a brief moment, it made her feel close, as if she had just left the room. Snape knew more about Lily than her own son did. Not out of jealousy, but necessity. Harry carried her blood. Snape carried her legacy. In the shadows, he had become her silent historian, preserving her not as a saint or a martyr, but as a living woman with contradictions, imperfections, and breathtaking humanity. It was a cruel irony that he, and not Harry, held the most complete portrait of her. "Look at me." Those were his last words, and they were not a plea, they were a final act of defiance against oblivion. In Harry's eyes he saw her, not metaphorically, not poetically, truly, the same almond shape, the same green hue. In his dying breath, Severus reclaimed a fragment of her, anchoring his soul to hers once more. His life had been hollowed by choices, but his death was filled with the image of Lily Evans. Severus Snape was not redeemed by bravery, nor by sacrifice. He was redeemed by remembrance. His love was not loud or pure or noble. It was obsessive, painful, and imperfect, but it was real. It existed in the details, the color of her curtains, the shape of her signature, the books she never returned to the library. In the end, Snape did not just die for Lily. He lived for her memory.